Okay, well, we might as well get started for those that have joined us since. My name is Hans Visser. I'm the Biodiversity Officer with Fingal County Council, and today, we'll be telling you a bit more about the goat grazing project that we've been doing on Howth. Just, I suppose, a bit of a background to the project itself. Howth has been plagued by wildfires over the last 50 years or so, and no different than other parts of the country. But I suppose what we wanted to do is to come up with some sort of more proactive way of dealing with these wildfires. Several years ago, we had international wildfire experts come and have a look at Howth, and they made sort of various recommendations as to how to control these wildfires to avoid damage to the landscape and to residential properties. And one of the main recommendations they made was to create wildfire breaks. Now, what are these wildfire breaks? These are basically areas that are like sort of wide strips to the landscape that have little to no vegetation on them, and that's the place where the fire brigade actually intercepts a wildfire. And the idea basically that the width of these wildfire breaks is usually around 10 times the height of the vegetation, but it's very important that those areas are kept short. So like the fire may be raging everywhere else, this is the point where the fire brigade can say, oh, we'll be intercepted here, and they don't need as much water, they don't need much effort to actually stop a fire at that point. One of the big points, I suppose, that like once you've created these fire breaks that we like we did on the Howth over the last couple of years, you do need to maintain them. We had different options for that. We can either do it through mechanical means, which with either with diggers or tractors, but we also wanted to see what we can do in terms of using livestock for that purpose, and goats in particular. And today, Melissa Jeuken will be telling us, I suppose, the results of a 3-year goat grazing trial in these wildfire breaks. So, Melissa, over to you. Oh, and actually, before I say that, Melissa's presentation will take around half an hour. If you have any questions that you want to ask, like put them in the Q&A box, and we'll go out once Melissa has finished her presentation. We'll be going over to the various questions. All right. So, Melissa.
Thank you very much, Hans. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this evening. So yes, I'll be sharing a little update of my own learnings and observations, and I suppose a bit of an insight into my work with my goat herd here in Howth. They have been dubbed the goat that fights fire. It's not a title we came up with ourselves. It's a title they have been given. So as Hans mentioned, my name's Melissa Jeuken, and I am the herder with the Old Irish Goat Society. And this was part of a 3-year trial grazing project in Howth. So I'll share you through our main findings, I suppose. So the project objectives were mainly based around the reintroduction of the native Irish goat to Howth, to also determine the conservation grazing capacity of these goats, especially on gorse, to reduce the wildfire risk. Then the practicalities of using free roaming or I suppose grazing livestock on such a public area. With that, we are trialing the virtual fencing system, and all in all, we are also protecting, promoting, and I suppose saving this native breed. So there were the 5 objectives that we tackled in this 3-year trial. So I'll go through them individually. So the first thing was to reintroduce the native Irish goat to Howth Head. And as you can see here, this is a picture on the hill of Howth taken around the 1950s. It's the Rickard family, a local family, and they're up there milking their goats as the community would have done for many generations in the past. And a practice, I suppose, that has returned now. People have spotted me up on the hill milking a few goats for my tea or coffee as well. And it's been shared out with the community. So it's the goats coming back to their home place, I suppose. So arrival into Howth, the project started off with the arrival of the Old Irish goats, which originally came from Mulranny. And I started in Mulranny myself, and then we moved across on the 8th of September with a crew of 25 female goats. So there's 25 originals that started in Howth and were transported from west to east. The most important thing we had to do or organize first was to create a home from home for these guys. So I call it base camp. So we have, we're on the last remaining farm on Howth, where we've rented 2 paddocks and a shed, and that's our base camp or our working quarters. And this is where the herd was initially settled, and from there we worked out into new sites. So objective number 2 was to determine the conservation grazing capacity of these goats. So just to go back to the Old Irish goat being a primitive breed, they're a very hardy, resilient animal. So the most suitable animal for this kind of rough terrain, rough forage, poor quality forage, I suppose, and just the right animal up for the job. So we had to determine how effective they were on mature gorse to reduce the wildfire risk, and also their effect on gorse seedlings and gorse regrowth. This picture here was taken in 2017. It's close to the convent and just off the old Firebreak road. And you can see the impact of the fire to that site, massive loss of habitat, destruction, loss of wildlife that's there, and biodiversity. Also a massive impact on the flight zone. We're very close to Dublin Airport, so that smoke had a massive impact on that as well. And then just safety for people and homes, and just, I suppose, general air pollution. So that's where the goats are coming in as a way of managing these risks and reducing these risks. So on the mature gorse grazing, we started demonstrating how we could actually create fire breaks from scratch. This is a site, you see a public walkway going through the centre, and I had the group of bucks, the bachelor herd, grazing here over the winter months. On the left hand side, they were not grazing on the right hand side, so you can see the comparison. It's about a 1 hectare block with 12 bucks in that site for 4 months over the winter. Again, this is a drone footage of the same site. You can see the public walkway going through, and the comparison of left to right. So the left, you see the monocrop of gorse, quite dense. On the right, you see that site is nearly cleared. And if you look very carefully, you can spot the bucks. So there's 12 bucks in that group altogether. They would be aging from 2 to 10 years of age. So this is I suppose, a closer look at the vegetation that is there. So it's pretty much a monocrop of gorse. Like any, I suppose, landscape in the past, it was quite well managed, and livestock were grazing on all these sites. But as farming practices ceased, livestock became less of a regular occurrence, and gorse pretty much took over. And the fact that gorse is flammable, it is a high fire risk. So what we're trying to do here is reduce the cover of gorse, and in a way as well actually enhance a bit of biodiversity to allow other species to come to the fore. So you can see the dense canopy of the gorse. After that 4-month grazing trial, you can see what the bucks did in terms of creating or making the start in creating that firebreak. So a lot of that gorse needles and vegetation has been removed, and the seedbed has been exposed to sunlight. Now, goats can be described as destructive, but they have cleared that site through rotational grazing. They moved off that site in April, and 2 months later, you see the variety of species coming back. And the most important thing is that that soil layer is covered. So in the previous 2 slides where we saw the canopy of gorse, this one here, there is a green canopy, but the base layer is actually bare soil. So through the exposure of opening up that canopy, our base layer is now covered in green growing species. However, like anything, management is a repeated action. So here, 8 months after grazing, that's that same site. Now, the density of the canopy isn't as dense as it was before grazing, but you can see its recovery. And gorse being a legume, it does carry a lot of nitrogen, so its recovery is quite fast. So with that, our repeated grazing is our mechanism to reduce that gorse cover and actually allow different species to come to the fore. Then in terms of the impact of grazing mature gorse versus gorse regrowth. So in the picture on the left, that was a mature gorse stand, again, about 3 meters high, very dense canopy. And the base layer was just bare soil covered in gorse needles. Very flammable, easy for a fire to travel through, and easy for a fire to travel to the canopy. What the goats have done is they've grazed out the mature gorse, opened up that canopy, and again exposed it to light. So you have your green carpet coming in. The green carpet is not very flammable. It doesn't encourage fire to travel to the canopy. And with that, we still have a canopy crop, which is also great for the bees and the early blossoms. But we also have a green carpet. So in future, potentially, instead of creating fire breaks from scratch by removing mature gorse stands and exposing soil, exposed soil, I suppose, there is a chance of bringing in goats initially to open up these sites, graze them out, improve access and visibility of these sites, and in return, that when mature scrub has to be removed, there's less destruction done to the soil layer. But most importantly, there is a green cover there already, which will compete with gorse seedlings. So instead of gorse seedlings having a head start, there is an existing green carpet there. On the picture on the right, it is gorse regrowth that's being managed by the goats. And that would have been, I suppose, the digger would have removed large mature gorse stands, and the regrowth, I suppose, appeared the next spring. The goats came in 4 years after this activity took place, and they have grazed it for two and a half consecutive years. But our gorse still remains. What you can see, it's more like pinhead cushions, and it's been manicured and maintained, you could say, but it hasn't been eradicated. So they're very good at maintaining sites, but I suppose if your new gorse shoots have taken hold, you are on a time limit in terms of getting stock to site on time to keep that as a short carpet graze. Then another interesting finding, I suppose, from the winter grazing is the amount of bracken on Howth. There's a lot of bracken on Howth, and that actually poses the highest fire risk, especially in March. The trouble with that is it forms this thatch. So bracken will die back in the autumn, and because there's no livestock or animals going through, very little activity, this bracken just sits there as a thatch, very dry. It suffocates out the base layer, I suppose, and prevents light getting to the seedbed. It's a very high fire risk in March, and it also inhibits seedling germination. What you can see on the bottom picture is that same site, again, where the bucks spent their winter, but they didn't eat the bracken at this stage. I suppose it's a dead plant during the winter months, so it's not palatable in any way, shape or form, but it actually is started to degrade because of the activity of stock movements through the site. So it speeds up the decomposition. I suppose it turns into compost quicker and gets worked into the soil by the presence of these trampling hooves. It also exposes the seedbed to sunlight, which promotes the seedlings, the seeds that are present, I suppose, to give them a chance and a head start to emerge in the spring. And also the fire risk is massively reduced. This is another picture. Con is my poser here. So I brought him to site on day one. You can see him on the left. He's nearly smothered in the bracken thatch. And then 4 months later, he's just, I suppose, standing on top of the bracken mulch. You can see the way that they've trampled it down, got it into contact with the soil, which increases the decomposition rate. And you can just about see a few green shoots coming through as well in the springtime. So again, this is a winter activity which sets up that site for a good start in the spring. Here we have some little videos just demonstrating their grazing abilities. So it's starting from the right this time. So we have Demona demonstrating her appetite for bracken itself. And this is an activity I observed quite early on. And then the second year I was kind of surprised by it because they were reluctant to initially graze it too early in the season. Now bracken is toxic. And it can have an accumulative effect on animal health. And these guys know that only too well. So the calendar month kind of denotes their appetite for bracken. And it is as soon as July hits, I suppose the chemical composition of bracken changes and they'll actually graze on a lot of it. Now, with that in mind, I do make sure they always have a variety of forage in the site and it's free choice for them to graze on the bracken. But you'll see them avoiding it early in spring. And then after July, they actually have a great appetite for it. Now in the middle, we have Miney demonstrating her interest in ragwort. This was them arriving to a new site, and the first thing she did was to deadhead all the ragwort. Again, there was plenty of choice of different species. Her personal choice was the ragwort, and she lived to tell the tale, let's put it that way. Again, part of a varied diet. These guys can tolerate a lot of noxious weeds. They have the largest liver of all ruminants, which helps them detoxify all these plants. So again, it's free choice and a happy camper, happy job. Here we have Wild West demonstrating her very agile, nimble lips, I suppose, to tackle the gorse. So you can see them, they just settle themselves in around the bush and just work away on all the shoots, I suppose. There's a great appetite for it. It is a legume. It actually carries about 16% protein, so it's a nutritious food. It's just very tricky to eat. So these guys have a grazing palate for this particular plant. As a primitive breed with their rough gum and thick skin, I suppose, they can tolerate these needles and digest it into a substance that sustains them. So again, this is a picture from in the middle of July, where the bucks actually demolished a real dense bracken stand. Now, the importance of timing of grazing and forage selection is crucial. So again, this was only part of their grazing paddock. As you can see, the stalks remain. The perimeter is actually marked by their vertical collars, which I will talk about in a minute. So they couldn't go any further. That's why they didn't eat any more. But they just distinctly outlined their vertical boundary and ate all the bracken in sight. This was the first year we got to that site. It was July of 22, and now 2 years later, there is still, I would say, 40% of bracken remaining, but the rest of that site is covered in grass and different species. So the bracken is reducing due to the impact of goat grazing and the presence of stock trampling as well. Then on the note of different plants and what they can eat, unfortunately, the thing they can't eat is rhododendron. So there is rhododendron on Howth. I suppose it's too much of a job to safeguard every single corner, the fact we're grazing so many sites. So a certain percentage of the herd is exposed to rhododendron, and I expose them to it, I suppose, as part of a learning trial. So Dermot was my first patient here in the centre. The typical symptom of rhododendron poisoning is a vomiting goat. So you can see his beard is covered in green vomit. He's not feeling the best. So he was taken off the hill and given supportive care. Basically just hydration and charcoal to neutralize and detoxify him. He made a full recovery, but he was unwell for 2 to 3 days. With that, he learned his lesson and will not touch it again. Now he's my guiding babysitter, I suppose, and all the young bucks go up there in the autumn when they're weaned, and he I suppose shows them the ropes. Now again, about 30% of the herd will still eat rhododendron, so it's a learned behaviour to avoid, and it's a risk that we I suppose expose them to in stages and monitor them for care and welfare. Once they're rhodo smart or hill smart, again, they will avoid it for life. If we had nannies and kids grazing up there, it would be the mum demonstrating this to their kids. So this is Dermot here on the right, made a full recovery and just given a little massage of thanks. He's a very gentle giant, really. So then down to Firebreak maintenance, I suppose our main job description. So I'm just showing you one of the Firebreaks we manage, and there's quite a few on Howth, and we haven't, I suppose, tackled all of them yet in the 3 years. So this Firebreak, again, you can see a before and after picture on the top and below. The vegetation, I suppose, to go back to the start, you see the tall gorse on either end, and that Firebreak was created with a machine, a digger and a flail, 4 years prior to the goats arriving. And the goats are coming in now to maintain that. So the regrowth or the vegetation present is a mixture of bracken, briars and gorse. So I stocked this site with 16 goatlings, so 1 to 2 year old goats. It's a 0.2 hectare site. They were there for 1 month, and I carry out this grazing practice twice a year. So it's a rotational grazing practice. You can see on the bottom picture, you can see the stems of the bracken remaining, all the foliage is gone, and they have I suppose, kept the vegetation height down, and it's back to a manageable height. Easy access with low biomass for a fire to travel across, and very easy access for the fire brigade to get to site. If a fire were to burn in the gorse stand, the advice is to let it burn into itself and man these fire breaks, so that you don't end up wasting valuable resources and time trying to quench a fire that's going to burn too hot regardless of your inputs. But you're better off just manning this fire break with a knapsack sprayer or a beater, and preventing the fire from jumping across. So you're just cutting the landscape into parcels. And the main observation, this is the same fire break, looking from the northern aspect kind of down, and you can see over the 2.5 grazings that we've done, 2.5 seasons that we've done, I suppose, 6 grazings, it's becoming more of a pastoral fire break. So again, when initially that mature gorse was taken out, you had a bare seedbed of soil, exposed soil, open to erosion, all those type of things. So now it is a pastoral firebreak covered with a variety of species. You can see the before and after in the pictures, and the fact that the goats have manicured it quite tidily. With that, they also do a great job for weed control. There's a lot of pioneering species coming up as we open up these sites with different ragworts and thistles and nettles, and these guys do have an appetite for them as well. Another observation is, so the top of the firebreak borders a field that is actually covered in ragwort. And again, it's the virtual line. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse here, but the virtual line is carried on as a curve, and the goats have, I suppose, removed all the bracken growing in that space and on the edge of the field. And you can clearly see where they do not have access to the remaining forage and where they have avoided eating that ragwort, I suppose. So again, it really delineates their grazing paddock. Another observation, this is another firebreak down at Bellingham's at base camp. At the top you can see we did a nice tight graze in the spring, again to, I suppose, remove any rank grasses. You can see the gorse canopy opening up on either end, and then we let the paddock rest. So with timing of grazing, we can allow different species to do their thing. Goats having an appetite for pretty much anything and everything, I suppose, would be deadheading all your plants and flowers all year round if they could. So we practice rotational grazing, and as we're opening up these sites, we can see the pioneering species come through. On the bottom picture here, you can see the oxeye daisy, and that's the only oxeye daisy present in this 5-hectare site, and it only emerged when the goats started grazing it after their first season. So the timing of grazing is crucial. I graze it out early in the spring and let it rest to let these plants flower and seed and do their thing, and let this biodiversity build up, which is coming up from the natural storage in the seedbed. With the no fence system that I will talk about shortly, the novelty of that also is that we can include these exclusion zones. So it's very easy to exclude delicate sites that we want the goats not to have access to, I suppose. So there is strict management on where the goats are and where they graze, and for how long, I suppose. Then the third objective was to ascertain the practicality of free roaming goats on public sites. Now the term free roaming, that's might be what it looks like, but there is no free roaming stock on Howth. They're all carefully managed, and the fact they all have a name, it's very easy to pinpoint who's acting up or who's being naughty. So there is very good traceability on these guys. Here you can see some of our no fence collars in different maps and sites. So we have the herd scattered on various different sites working away at all times. We do have signage up just to explain what's going on, and also to ask the public to help us by keeping their dog on the lead and keeping their dog under control, as this can worry livestock. So I suppose we inform the public of where we are. We have signage up at all the entrance points, so people are aware where the goats are and they can take the necessary precautions. And again, with the virtual fencing system, all stock are managed and not quite free roaming, but we are grazing public sites. I'll touch on that a little bit more later as well, but the novelty of having these stock out on these public sites is quite a sight to behold. It's amazing to come across them just doing their thing. I do quite assertive training, as I call it, with the volunteers, with the stock, because we don't want these animals, these goats, getting too distracted while they're working. So we don't want them approaching the public. So they are upgrading public sites, but they are kind of trained or kept trained to keep to themselves. And that said, the herd has grown a lot. I'll go through the numbers in a minute. But a lot of people would tell you they only rarely see the goats, so they really blend in with their environment, which also keeps them safe. So that has done really well for them. Again, being a primitive breed and our native breed, they are part of the landscape and always were. So that keeps them safe in these public sites as well. So then down to the virtual fencing technology. So we I suppose the main request here is Howth is a very public space with a lot of walkways. Yet a lot of the habitat isn't managed anymore. There's no grazing stock present on a lot of sites. So this trial was about reintroducing grazing stock, but the public request was for there to be no physical fences, no gates to open and close, no areas cordoned off. So it was up to Hans to figure out how we were going to do that initially, and he came across this Norwegian fencing system, the no fence system. So we tried that here in Howth as well. So it's very innovative. It works really well on this crew. We have to have a collar on every single animal. Young stock will follow their mum for the first 5 months in mum's grazing behaviour, so they aren't collared till they're about 5 or 6 months of age. But all adults have to be collared. They are herd animals, so they'll act as a herd. And I suppose everybody needs to be reading from the same hymn sheet. So we don't want any animal without a collar that could be teaching the rest bad habits or exposing them to unnecessarily bad habits. So with the no fence collar, we actually have GPS location on all stock, which is a great asset in terms of their safety and their monitoring. We can make real-time adjustments to the pasture. Again, a very beneficial tool. There's no unsightly fencing or disturbance of sites. A lot of Howth is SAC, so special area of conservation. So again, we can strategically map grazing sites, come in with grazing stock, map it out on the phone, go to do their job, they move on. There is no actual physical presence on that site of any infrastructure. So there's no disturbance. The other benefit is that I suppose goats can graze where man and machine should not go. So again, we can access very difficult, tricky sites without requiring contractors or staff to fence off these sites or put in any type of infrastructure to allow this grazing to happen. So that's very beneficial. Now I have a little video here, but I don't think the audio is going to work. It's Norman here up on Shilmartin. So he's demonstrating how these collars work. So the boundary is mapped on the phone, on a phone app to do with GPS location. When they get close to that virtual boundary, an audio warning sets off. So I can just hear it now. I'm not sure if it's coming across. So he hears that audio warning. It does increase in pitch with time. And he's adhering to that audio warning and turned around as he should, and knew, got the message, mustn't graze further on that edge. So it's not, I suppose there's a lead in time, there's a change in pitch of the audio warning, and these guys get fairly clever with that. So here is, I suppose, the phone app. So on the left, we have, as all the animals are named, it's very easy to keep track of who's who instead of trying to deal with serial numbers. So we have the name, we have the battery status. So there is a rechargeable battery included that needs to be recharged and changed every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how many audio tunes they play or how many audio tunes they set off, I suppose. In the middle, you can see the heat map feature. So again, you can analyze grazing sites in terms of stock preference. It's also very easy for even just for healthcare. We take dung samples for monitoring, and it's very easy first thing in the morning. It's just to check where they slept that night before. From the heat map, I suppose it only I suppose starts fresh every 24 hours. So in the morning, you can easily find out where they've spent the night. Go to site, get your fresh dung sample for sending off as well. But so you can monitor their grazing activity. Also, if there maybe are areas on the paddock that they're not grazing or going to, there might be a reason for that, whether it's exposed or risk or it's a valley. So again, you can analyze stock behavior with that. A lot of these things you also do out in the field, and the app, I suppose, is a backup and a confirmation of these things. With that, so the third picture on the right, you can see how we can map out a paddock. We can also include exclusion zones, like I mentioned, and we have the acreage there as well. We can edit that boundary at any stage virtually, and we can move collars in and out of that boundary. So here on the left, you can see it's the goatlings. They're demonstrating their perfection of straight line grazing. So I have a white peg in the field just to denote the virtual boundary for myself and the volunteers. When we're walking to site, we know when we are entering the paddock and leaving the paddock. And you can see the strip grazing, I suppose, that the goats can do with that system. And it was easier to demonstrate that on grass than on forage. Then here in the middle, we have a chap. I suppose you can go into every collar individually as well. So we have a chap here called Nesson. You can see the name. The pasture, he's on the Shilmartin Firebreak. His number, his reports. But then electric pulses. Oh yeah, so the audio warning, this goes back to my explanation of the system, but the audio warning sets off, increases in pitch. If that animal doesn't respond to that by turning around and terminating that, they will get an electric pulse like you would from touching an electric fence. And I suppose that's their cue to say, if you go further, you will get a pulse, so don't go any further. And that's why they turn around and I suppose work that system. So here you can see Nessun had 0 electric pulses, but then if you go to the audio warning settings of today, so again, everything just runs for 24 hours, he played music 194 times. It's an awful lot of tunes. So there is a bit of a rave on Howth Hill as well sometimes with these guys. Then if you go to the picture on the right, it's the same chap. You can, I suppose, get all the GPS coordinates and you can see where he played that tune all along. Never breaking that boundary, never moving too far away from that boundary, and not exposing himself to any pulse whatsoever. So he understands that system very well, he cooperates with it very well, and he executes it very well, and that's how you can get that straight line grazing, I suppose, and how you can demonstrate that these stock are tightly managed. Here's another picture of Liam. Again, it's one of the grazing sites. You can see the proximity to the road and the wall that's present. So it's only a 3-foot wall. Anybody that knows goats knows that they are escape artists. So he'd have no trouble scaling that wall and getting onto the road if he so wished. But he's wearing that GPS collar. And with that, these guys are grazing that full site without, I suppose, the risk of getting on the road. And they're fully compliant, which is a great I suppose, well done job to them as well. Then the final part of our objectives was to increase the goat numbers of this native breed. The status of the project also highlighted this breed, and they finally were recognised as a native Irish breed in June of 2022. So the breeding programme of our native Irish goat, the Old Irish Goat, is in Howth. And over the 3 years, we have bred 53 nannies. With that, 69 additions have been born in Howth. So the first chap that was born, Mir, he was the first kid, Old Irish Goat kid born in Howth in 70 years. And 68 comrades have followed him since. Now the herd has grown through the addition of more members from the national herd, including stock from Mulranny and some of our satellite herds. So the Howth herd has grown from a start of 25 females in September of 21 to 137 goats on the hill at the moment. We've had 3 breeding programs, 3 years in a row. And I suppose it has been pretty much a one-person operation for most of that time. So stock numbers are very much at capacity for that one person. Now we do actually have an apprentice on board now to assist and I suppose carry out the knowledge transfer as well. So there is capacity to grow these numbers further. Right, there's a little video of Delilah and her 2 girls. She's a 5-year-old nanny and she's only ever birthed female kids so far. So she's very prolific for the female kids and she's got a great set of genes, so it's great to see them on the ground. Now with the increased herd numbers, it also meant more stock movements, more training and management. Like anything, the more members in the group, the more chance of trouble. So we have to keep on top of their training, their manners, I suppose. And with that, we do have the herd of 137 split up into probably 8 groups at the moment, with a minimum of 10 animals per group, but a max of around 20. So we keep them in small, manageable groups, so everybody can get the needed attention and there's nobody really acting out or going unnoticed, I suppose. Again, I have a few videos here. I don't think the audio will play. The first one starting here on the left. So this is me on a Monday, summoning up the troops ready to move out to a public grazing site. They would be in a private site at the weekends for the maternity herd mainly. So what I do, I imitate a goat call them over, and then wait for the troops to arrive. I'm sure you've all heard my goat call on different networks at this stage. Good morning. And now remember that these guys have spent the weekend in the site with the virtual no fence boundary. So the second clip shows, I suppose, me initiating a move. You'll see them following. You'll see Colleen, the matriarch, she's white with a tan neck and head, kind of pausing at the end and just double checking that they're safe to move through. So just a little bit hesitant there because we are crossing that virtual boundary. I've obviously deactivated the collars and assigned them to a new pasture, but it's just a bit of confidence building and training that when I mean business, we're moving and let's go and it's safe to go. So it's to instill that training in them as well so that we can move safely to sites. And like that, the maternity herd, we would have them in a base camp during the weekend and move them out to public sites during the week, and they'll be moved on foot up to about a kilometre of walking or so. So the final video here on the right shows us going through the old farmyard, and again we're going out to a public site now. There's 20 in this group, so again, not enough, not too many goats, so they won't be acting out. So we go through a little hidden door out to a public site, and once they get to that site, I reactivate their collars in the new pasture and set them in there. And what I do is I just walk the boundary with them so they know where those virtual boundaries are. I set off all those audio tunes and they know, right, now this is where we are, this is where we are for the day or the week. Then the bucks on the move. So the bucks actually graze sites on the other end of the other side of the road, I suppose. The one thing we have not done is cross the road with the stock. These guys being flighty and primitive in nature, the fear, the worry and the risk is that when these guys do get a fright, what they'll do is want to go home, or wherever home is, or wherever their safe place is. So if I potentially show them the way home, by venturing across the road with them and returning that way to go home, I suppose they know their way home. So we don't take that risk. The bucks actually spend their time on the hill 24/7, and in between sites, we just load them up in the trailer and move them to the new site, settle them in, and that's all they know. That's their new home for that moment, for that 1 month, 3 months, whichever it is, depending on the site and the rotational grazing plan. So unfortunately, I have 2 videos here that won't play for me, but the middle one is just to demonstrate the gentle giants that they are and how they just follow suit. Now, again, this is taking a lot of training and acclimatization, and they would know me very well at this stage, so they wouldn't be that obedient to a stranger. The other video on the right is loading them up in the trailer. So again, it's the trailer set up. And there's a feed trough put inside. These guys move in. I walk behind them, close the pen. It's all part of training for them. So there's no big hassle or stress in terms of loading or moving stock. It's all routine, and we just keep replicating these routines. Too far. Then in terms of managing satellite herds, so as I mentioned, like the bucks, they'd be on different sites across the road. Every site that's away from base camp has a handling pen. So these are actually alpaca hurdles, very lightweight. They were located by one of our Mayo members, and they're a joy to work with. They give the height to prevent goats jumping them. Now, if they wanted to, they can jump them, but I suppose they're less likely to jump them in a managed environment. So every site has this handling pen on site with a feed trough in it, and I also have a bucket of feed at site. Now the bucket of feed, you'll always see me with a bucket of feed. It's a management tool. These bucks, these are the bachelor boys. Some of them are trained to come into this pen at any given time. They'll present themselves in the pen. I could just close the gate and carry out any task that's needed, whether that's changing a battery on a collar, or if there's a lameness or something to be checked out. We just have it as routine that they come into that pen, they get a little treat, and anything that needs to be done is carried out. So all satellite herds have a handling pen on site. Then the Goat Squad. So the Goat Squad are my volunteer group. So I'm on site 5 days a week, but these are livestock we're dealing with. So they don't just work or survive 5 days a week and go into sleep mode at the weekend. They still need a bit of health and welfare checks and things like that. So the Goat Squad is formed out of local volunteers and community members that have grown to be very invested in the running of this project. So it's also been great for getting the community buy-in And like I mentioned, all the goats have names. So these guys are I suppose the goat squad have their different favorites and have built up a relationship with the stock. So they're an absolutely invaluable support network to myself. I'm on site 5 days a week. The goat squad would cover weekend checks. So a lot of stock are either at base camp or on different sites, and they have I suppose we have a roster in place that all the animals are still checked and seen during the weekend as well. Just a once a day check, just to confirm everybody's alive and well and in good form. And if there's any issues, it can be picked up on very quickly. So that also means that we actually keep a really high welfare status in place. Again, it just means any issues are picked up on very quickly and can be dealt with as needed. Again, their livestock we're dealing with, their goats, they get up to mischief if they want to. So it's important to see them once a day. Here is a picture on the right, captured by one of the volunteers, Caroline. As I mentioned, all the collars have GPS tracking. With that, actually, if a collar becomes detached, I will get notification that the collar is not detecting movement. Now, that would mean that there's an animal not moving, which either an animal has potentially deceased or something has happened. But basically, usually what the situation is that through a bit of fighting or in-house fighting, a collar has broken, a strap has snapped, something like that, and there's a broken collar on the site, and there's an unmanaged animal. So that means getting the boys into the pen, reattaching, fixing that collar and reattaching that collar. Again, no biggie with these very trained management tasks, and can be carried out very quickly by quite a number of trained volunteers. Again, everything that's needed is close to site, so it's no biggie. Here, the picture on the right, this is Liam. So me back in Clare, keeping an eye on the app, it will tell me everybody's fine, everybody's moving. But Liam got into a bit of a hustle with some other chap, probably Cuchulainn, and he ended up wearing his collar on his horn. So again, according to technology, everybody's alive and well and on best behaviour. But Cuchulainn potentially could be anywhere in Howth if he wanted to be. So again, it's that physical presence, just to do a check and count, assess stock. That then means that stock are closely monitored, closely managed, and their welfare is regarded to the highest. So again, there was no trouble just to detach that collar from Liam and reattach it to the right guy in a timely manner. But again, it could be easily misled, and the importance of people on the ground, active involvement can't be understated, and especially with animals. Some perks of the job as a goat squad volunteer is the kid cuddle sessions. So these guys, being a primitive breed, they are a bit flighty. So we do some mandatory kid cuddling in the first few weeks of life, just to handle them a little bit more and make them a little bit more manageable. The cue is whenever they come up and nibble your shoes, that means they're cuddled enough and they can be left to their own, because we don't want them too tame and approaching public, I suppose. This was a little photo shoot we did the other week, just to again show community involvement and engagement. So we have the volunteers in high vis, and then other members that were involved with the project through TY work placements and other local community groups that were actively involved, represented here. The high vis are nicely labelled goat squad as well. So people in Howth know what you're talking about when you say goat squad. And this is Dermot here, being the goat representative on the day. So of this, people might presume I'm goat mad. I do have plenty of goat pictures on the phone, mainly to do with monitoring and just assessing things. But my goat squad members and the general community in Howth have galleries full of pictures now as well. And these pictures actually travel nationwide to friends and families, and actually internationally to friends and families, with a story attached, with a name, whether it's weekly progress on growth rates on kids, or some cheeky behavior, or some crazy poses that they're doing. So these guys are really connecting in with the community, with families, and actually carrying that message forth. They're very picturesque as they are, but the goats in Howth have really had an impact on the community and have been cherished by the community and safeguarded by the community as well. Then we took on a few little jobs on the side. and there's plenty more potential there, I suppose, as well. So here we have some pictures from a restoration project in Swords, where we sent 10 bucks to a half-acre walled garden site that had completely overgrown and was due for restoration. So they were there for 5 weeks. So picture one, top left, you can see the height of vegetation and the height of ivy mainly on the walls. Now ivy is their favourite plant, so when I was approached about this site, I jumped at it straight away because again, it's the healthiest forage for these guys. So the first thing we did is we brought the 10 bucks to site, and they spent 2 weeks grazing out the surface level forage and the perimeter on the walls. And you can see the nice straight line grazing. Then what happened is the tree surgeons came in, cut down the remaining forage, and they grazed that out. So all that was left after that was woody stems debarked by the goats. So there was only a tiny amount of material to be removed off-site, which would have been a daunting task if the goats hadn't gone through it. And I suppose the goats digest these things and just turn it into fertilizer pellets. So they did a great job with that. So the main objective was to trim the vegetation to delicately reveal existing original features ahead of restoration works. So here is an old cast iron flower stand, and you can see there's a tiled floor surrounding it. So again, if heavy machinery had come in, unbeknownst to knowing what's underneath, all these areas could have been damaged. Goats being so nimble and gentle on their feet wouldn't cause that damage. So during the grazing period, there was the discovery of these tiles, also espalier fruit trees, mainly an old pear tree that the goats did not damage in the process. But the main discovery was actually an 8-foot entrance. Up to this point, we were coming in and out through one little doorway, and that was the expectation for removing any, I suppose, remaining woody stems as well, was going through that doorway. So the site was so overgrown that there was no recollection or history shared across about that 8-foot entrance. So during their grazing job, they massively reduced the vegetation and only woody branches remained. There was a great feel-good factor and public relations in terms of connecting with the community and the staff that were checking in on stock once a day. On this site, this was in Swords, I would have been down to stock once a week, and all other stock checks were carried out locally daily. There was also very little noise pollution compared to machinery, and this site was adjacent to a housing estate, and none of the house owners were any the wiser that there was a bunch of rowdy bucks in there for the 5 weeks. And it was also a cost-effective exercise and very sustainable. It nourished the boys, and I suppose it cleared up the site very nicely. This is a picture of the 8-foot entrance. So again, on the left, you can see the density of that briar bush, and the old kind of weedy scrub and everything. Just a very messy site. Through grazing it out, that 8-foot arch was discovered, which now is a prime feature and was a great access route, and will be for times to come as well. Here's another picture of before and after. So in the past, there was actually cattle put into this walled garden. So again, at the top, you can see the boys on day one, and at the end of the 5 weeks, you can see the nice clean walls. Here on the right, you can see their immaculate straight line grazing lines going up to a height of about 2 meters. So they do a very tidy job, very dedicated workforce. Then another job we did, and this was only this spring, was clearing out this old graveyard that's also due to be restored. So again, it's the goats coming in initially to open up these sites, expose these features, which then can be delicately restored. So this site has an old altar from the 4th to 5th century. It's in Bracken, and there were 17 goats stationed there for 6 weeks. So the bottom left, you can see drone imagery of the before and after. And here on the right, you can see, I suppose, the clearance. This site is adjacent to Bremore Castle. These are some of the gravestones uncovered. Here in the center, Leah is posing herself on top of this old altar, which wasn't damaged in the proceedings, I suppose. But again, they're very nimble on their feet, so delicately worked through this site, open it up, and allowed for full assessment and further works. With, again, because they, I suppose, process all that greenery into little dung pellets, there's very little waste left, and the site is really opened up and accessible. So then coming back to the main lessons learned from Howth. like with animals and ourselves, the first most important thing is to find your home, find your base. So the private farm, the last remaining farm on Howth, is the perfect base for this crew, and really allowed them to settle in fast and acclimatise. With that, initially we had the 25 goats there. These were very flighty and needed a lot of time to acclimatise and to heft to this new site. There was also a lot of time needed to acclimatise the herd to the community, to dog walkers, to the public interactions. And that really worked in their favour in time to create a community outreach through engaging with different community groups and doing public talks, and also inviting school groups down to, I suppose, learn about why they're there and what they're doing and what impact they're having and how we need them, I suppose, to help us, especially in terms of managing their dogs, so that these guys can work on their job safe and sound. Satellite groups was a major boost, I suppose. Instead of growing the herd into one big herd that's kind of hard to manage, we broke them up into satellite groups. So we have the bachelor boys, which are the breeding bucks. We have the bucklings, we have the goatlings, the yearlings, the maternity group, the kids. So there's all different groups that I suppose also graze different sites, and with that we can have the animals suited to their best suited site, I suppose, as well, being the boys being sent out as the first line of defence in exposed sites, and maternity herds staying very close to base camp. Stationary herds was another big thing. Instead of moving stock day in, day out, which takes a lot of time and effort, it is part of their training program and is done for all stock initially. But then they become stationary herds in different sites and graze that for a month at a time, and are on this site 24/7. So that means they actually do a more effective graze because they're there 24/7. There's less moving of stock, there's less nervousness and unknown kind of routines, and they do a better job, and they're also there kind of in their own element managing this site, and they feel they own it, they manage it, they take hold of it. Timing of grazing is crucial, especially for the gorse, in terms of palatability and softness, and after frost there's more sugar and nutrition in it as well, so they do a great graze in the winter. The gorse is also evergreen, so that's a great benefit to this being a fully forage fed diet for these guys, and having forage available all year round. So these guys are out on the hill all year round. Heather as well, we're seeing a great uptake on the heather in late in the season and early in the season. So they completely avoid the heather flowers, so let the heather flower and seed, and then they just prune it in the early and end stages of the year, again to promote tillering and a better soil cover. We have the capabilities of a strategic application of grazing. So with the no-fence system, again, we can target very strategic sites, very strategic areas, and map those very accordingly to the habitat and the vegetation present. So that makes it, I suppose, a very managed system instead of this idea of free roaming goats eating anything and everything. The most important part, I suppose, is that the caprine crew, the goat herd, is very dynamic and adaptive. They're very resilient, very hardy. They can do a lot. They can handle a lot. Their diet is very diverse. A lot of invasive species is another thing they can actually do a great job on. So they are very suited to a multitude of projects of this caliber and sites, and still growing as well. So it's a great utility. It's a great attribute that they have, and it's a great thing that we can, I suppose, cherish them for, support them in, which in return supports us, supports the environment, and the sustainable management of the environment and these difficult habitats. So they're the best suited animal for that job. And being so dynamic and adaptive means that we can really be quite flexible in the amount of different projects and I suppose angles we can take on that. Then just I suppose a final note is a massive thank you to our partners. So I suppose the Old Irish Goat Society is the enabler in this project in terms of I suppose having stock available to come to site and provide this grazing service. But it's Fingal County Council that initiated this programme and has supported it from day one. And there are core workforce, I suppose. It's also in collaboration with the Howth SAAO, who are the community group that look after the Howth habitat and promote its uniqueness and keep it as protected and intact as it has been for many generations. And the Goat Squad volunteers linked in with the Howth community are the core crew in terms of keeping the show on the road, keeping a lookout for these guys, and I suppose blowing their trumpet and cherishing their presence and applauding their presence, I suppose, as well. So initially, I suppose I arrived to site with a crew of 25 goats. 3 years later, I'm on this site with a whole herd of goats, with a whole herd of humans around that as well, and a great community spirit and involvement there. So there's a lot of people talking about these goats in Howth. So it's really taken legs, and the story has travelled to a lot of different areas, and can travel even further, even in our own neighbourhoods and countryside. These guys can really, I suppose, diversify in the jobs they can do. And then finally, I do see the time. Sorry for waffling on so long. There is space and time for Q&A. So thank you very much for listening to all that.
Now, just thank you very much, Melissa, for giving this presentation. It's very hard to summarize 3 years of hard work by you and the goat volunteers and the wider community in a very short time period. But I think, on behalf of Fingal County Council, we certainly would like to thank you and the Old Irish Goat Society for running this project and for making it success that it has been. Now, at this point in time, I just wonder, does anybody have any questions you would like to ask Melissa? I suppose she has covered a lot, so there could be various ranges of topics there. I do see a question that's come in there already, just from Renee, just in terms of where the dung samples are sent and what the dung samples are analysed for.
So the dung samples are sent to a lab in Sligo. We have a department lab in Sligo that's doing all the testing for us. So they're very supportive of, I suppose, learning more about this primitive breed and doing a lot of data collection and helping us out. So we do monitor dung samples regularly. It's just for parasite burdens. So we practice rotational grazing to minimise parasite burdens, and we monitor dung samples just to see if our protocol is up to scratch. And I suppose it identifies any animal with a problem and then can be treated accordingly and very strategically. So it's I suppose a tool we use to show us that our rotational grazing system is working, which is a natural means of managing parasites.
Okay. Now, for anybody else that has sort of a question, just put it in the question and answer box, and then we can see it here. Wait, and just ask the questions. There's another question here. Like if we were to if we wanted to start a project like this based elsewhere in Ireland, what would sort of the key steps be for something like that?
I think like the lessons learned, it's to have that base, that site, that safety net. To start from and grow from. So it's about having your facilities for activities, I suppose. If an animal is ever sick or injured, you have a shed, or we have a shed, I suppose, available to care for these animals. And from there, that's to them is their safe place, their haven. And from there, they build up confidence, and we work out from there. So it's about creating that home, and then working out from there. With that, you obviously the stock needs to be managed, I would nearly say 24/7, but you need somebody dedicated and responsible for that task and flexible to, I suppose, work with that task as well. It isn't necessarily 9 to 5, but it's something that's in tune with these animals, with the habitat, with the site. Obviously, your site selection is very important, that it's safe and managed, and it's up to every individual site to be assessed accordingly, and any precautions or implements put in place to secure that, I suppose. And then it's your engagement with whether it's a landowner or if it's a public site, with the public, to again uphold those standards.
Okay. And I suppose, what would be as the herder, what is sort of the favorite part of your job?
There's a lot of diversity in it. There's no doubt about that. I think the main skill, the main trick, and the main appeal is you're working one-on-one with this crew. So you're working with them in sync, and if you do so, things go smoothly. These guys, it's about blending in with them, understanding them, building that trust, So then in return, they work with you. They can come across as really sweet and cuddly, but these guys are very clever, not easily fooled. So again, you always need to be a step ahead, and I suppose form that matriarch role and that guidance role. So with that, you do need to prove to them that you know your stuff and they can trust you. So it's building up that relationship, which then creates that great team dynamic, and you get to actually work with goats every day of the week, pretty much.
Very good. Well, I suppose just even in relation to that, I believe you guys have positions available for herders at the moment. If you want to say a little bit more about that, maybe.
We do indeed. So yeah, we've put a recruitment call out there. You'll find a job description on our website, theoldirishgoat.ie. So we're looking for herders and herder apprentices to join the team, as we are looking to expand into more projects and different areas. So the deadline is actually this Friday, the 28th. So if interested, please do put in a name. And even with that, we're hoping to create a panel that as different conservation grazing jobs come up in different areas in the country, it would be great to have a panel and a crew of herders available to take on a capping crew, a goat herd, and mobilize to these new sites and execute this kind of grazing management.
Okay, and that I suppose ties in because Kim actually had a question here as well. So, what are the future plans for the project? I suppose from our perspective on Howth, we're kind of looking at the possibility of continuing this project on Howth that's currently like up for consideration. Like we just want to kind of finalize arrangements around that to see how that can be done. But I think also nationwide there seems to be like more interest in it as well with some other local authorities or some other locations. If I understand that correctly.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Some east and west locations. Like I said, the conservation grazing with the goats is a management tool that could be rolled out nationwide in a lot of different jobs. We even do some garden grazes sometime, and invasive species as well. So it's something that could be applicable nationwide.
Okay. Now there's another question. I suppose, how can I see this presentation again? And would it be possible to send the presentation to friends abroad? We will be uploading this presentation on the Fingal County Council website. So you'll be able to, and the social media page, so you'll be able to download it from there and you can distribute it from there. It's open to everybody. And there's another question there then, like, can you elaborate on how the moms teach the kids not to eat rhododendron?
So yeah, they actually do a kind of a snorting technique, I suppose, to delineate between palatable plants and not palatable plants. Where we are in Howth, our base camp or safer sites where we have the maternity herd doesn't actually have any rhododendron on site. Some of the more exposed sites do. So I haven't been able to put this into practice with my own crew, and it's been the weaned kids that go up with the male group, the male kids, that are then exposed to the rhodo through that training mechanism. But if nannies and kids were able to, I suppose, carry on that task, they would do so, and the nanny would demonstrate this to the kids very, very clearly, and pass on that heritage and that knowledge.
Okay. Right. So is there any other questions at this point in time? Because otherwise we'll be like we can finish up for this evening then. I don't see anything else coming in here at the moment. So like, okay, well, we'll leave it at that, Melissa. Thank you so much for this presentation. As a congratulations again on the project. It's been a great success. For those, as I said earlier, like we will be publishing this presentation, so you can look at it again at your own time. But for now, I wish you all thank you all very much for attending, and hopefully, like all of you, should be out at some stage on Howth to go and see the goats over there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.